Hello, this is Terry with McHenry Creek Fishers, coming to you from Martindale, Arkansas. And today I want to talk to you about HAZCOM, hazard communication. Now, there's my phone number, there's my email address. Anytime you have a question, want to ask me anything, just shoot me an email and we can talk. But let's get started. HAZCOM started with OSHA Act of 70. We had some problems at work. People were working overexposed to chemicals and something needed to be done. And that's where we came up with the OSHA Act of 70. And throughout HAZCOM, you're going to find out about all different kinds of labels and SDSs, and that's where we're going to spend most of our time. So during this, we're going to talk about the regulatory basis, some of the basics of regulations that came into play, started in 70. HAZCOM became effective, I think, in 83. The various responsibilities, employer and employee. There is a HAZCOM program, really kind of defines who, what their job is, how they're going to accomplish their job according to HAZCOM. And we're going to talk about DOT labels and placards, and I'll touch on those a little bit later. Secondary labeling containers, sure, those come into play also. And we'll finish up with routes of entry toward the end of this. And again, this is going to be part 1 of HAZCOM, because part 2 and 3 are going to be safety data sheets, how to understand them, how to read them, and then the GHS labels and warning systems. I want to go into more detail. So those are going to be parts 2 and 3 of the HAZCOM series, let's call it. So, question. We deal with chemicals every day, correct? Yeah, we got all kinds of cleaning stuff. We got gasoline. There's all kinds of chemicals that we use every day. We like to use the term, well, ours are watered down, maybe. Still can be dangerous. If they're handled safely and properly, yeah, they're not a problem. But let's think about work again, why this rule came into play. 2 things cause chemicals to be more dangerous at work, usually. The quantity and the concentration. Quantities at home, I've got pints, quarts, and gallons usually. I do have one 5-gallon gasoline container, largest thing I have. And the concentration, they are weaker. Bleach, 3% or something. Hydrogen peroxide, 2%, on and on. But at work, these things can be 98%, 70%. Much more concentrated and stronger and more dangerous, especially if not handled correctly. Now, due to these exposures at work, this is where Congress passed the OSHA Act of 70. And then OSHA comes along and literally invents, hey, HAZCOM, hazard communication. This is the employee's right to know. I've seen inspectors. I've been on sites where inspectors would literally say, I'd like to see your right to know program. So that's what they call it. Now, remember, in 2013 to 17, we came up with GHS and gave us some more pictures and a little bit better understanding. So instead of just saying the employee has the need and the right to know the hazards of the chemicals, now we have the right to understand, and we should be able to understand. And if we follow these basic guidelines, I think we can. Now, the HAZCOM program has 5 parts. The hazard determination, this will be the employer, you'll see. They'll have a written program, again, defining who, what, and how. And then there's the SDSs and labels, and this is the part that comes into play for us. The 5th part is training. That means that our employees understand how to access an SDS and how to understand what they're looking at when they pull up an SDS. And labels are our warning, our immediate warning that are placed on containers. Remember, hazard determination by the employer. So let's look at the original jobs of the employer. We'll call them responsibilities. There's a written program, sure. The current list of chemicals, that's always difficult to keep up with. Obtain SDSs for all the chemicals that can be used in our workplace. How about labeling procedures? What label do we use on our secondary containers? And then make sure there's effective training. Remember, one of the highest citations that companies receive is ineffective training for HAZCOM. Our employees have to know how to access an SDS, how to understand it, and what our labeling procedures are. So my employer, again, review the products, determine how we're going to protect employees that are potentially exposed, understand the hazard so we can transfer that information to the employees, and then proper storage, and we'll talk about that really on part 3 of when we talk about SDSs. There's a whole section about proper storage. Employees comes into play here. This is our responsibilities. We got to follow what the program says. Now, OSHA says we must attend training. I think that's not an option, but this is where we're going to gather the information we need. So we have to, as an employee, understand the chemical hazards. Well, how are we going to do that? That goes back to the employer and training, making sure that we understand the hazards of the chemicals we work around. And OSHA does give us a little obligation here. It says the employee will report any unknown chemicals. If you've got a chemical you're working around and you're not sure of the hazards, you must report that. Also for employee, let's review SDSs. If you work around some dangerous chemicals, it'd be a good idea to know ahead of time what to do, and that's going to be section 2. I'm going to show you that in detail on one of the other videos. Section 2, hazard identification. We're also going to follow labeling procedures. All chemical containers got to have the proper labels on them, and we shall understand what PPE to use, how to properly use it, how to clean it, everything about it. Now we understand that because our employer, through training, and training means understanding, so now we understand what PPE is needed and how to use it. And now again, we have GHS, Global Harmonization System, Global Harmonizing System. I've seen it posted both ways, not even sure what they really call it. But it does make it easier to understand the hazards of these chemicals. It's going to incorporate a bunch of pictures, and we're going to have a complete video just on that. So that'll be HAZCOM Part 2. SDSs, I told you earlier, they're going to be Part 3. They're the primary source of information about chemicals developed by the manufacturer, and they're chemical specific for the ones that you buy. And there's 16 sections. Here's the first 8. I've bolded a couple of them. Hazard identification. This tells us how the chemical affects us and how to protect ourselves. There's also handling and storage. There's always good to know if you're storing yours in an area that's sometimes even cool enough. If it's too hot, it can cause some problems with the containers. But there's the first 8 sections. Here's the second 8. Section 9, physical chemical properties. Yeah, is my chemical flammable? What's the LEL, the lower explosion limit? Does it sink in water? Does it float in water? All this can be found on that section. And then there's a quick glance of a basic SDS. They hadn't even changed the name of it yet. It still says MSDS. But this has got the new global harmonization set up. And you can see the pictures, pictograms they call them, and a signal word, and hazard statements and precautionary statements. We'll go over that in detail in one of the other videos for HAZCOM. And then, more important than anything, how do we access SDSs? Is there a book on a wall? Is it in order? Do we use a website, internal website possibly? And that's fine. Make sure every employee has access, even if it's to where they tell their supervisor, and the supervisor takes them into a computer and pulls up the SDS so they can look at it together. But what is the SDS say about the chemical hazards that we're working with? Hopefully we've gleaned out all the information and give that to the employee. But anytime we want to know more, we can go look at that SDS. And in the SDS HAZCOM, I'm going to show you exactly how that lays out, section by section, show you how to read it, show you how to understand it. Let's take a look at some labels. I can see some buckets and containers, a big drum. I see DOT labels. I even see some GHS over there. But labels help us identify the hazard that's in the container. Labels go on individual containers. This is some DOT stuff also. SDSs, our labels, placards, labels on individual containers, placards that go on transports and other bulk containers. They all work together to warn, advise of the hazards. Take a look. I've got an HMS, very popular. This was one of the main secondary container labels we used to use, the HMAS, Hazardous Material Information System, blue, red, yellow, white. There's a numbering system that goes in the boxes 0 to 4. The higher the number, the greater the danger. The National Fire, the second one there, the triangle, the diamond-shaped one, blue, red, yellow, again, similar. Higher the number, greater the danger, 0 to 4. The DOT, the Department of Transportation, you can see there some of their hazard classes there. And then the GHS at the last one. And again, we've got the DOT on video already that you can see on my website. It's free. And GHS will be following this one. It'll be the next video up after this one goes up. The labels and placards are square, turned on a diamond, 4 inches approximately for the label on the container, 10.8, about 11 inches, let's say, that go on the transports going up down the highway. There's a graphic, and this is the flammable combustible liquids. There's the hazard class, and then there's the hazard class number. There's 9 hazard classes of chemicals per DOT, and a red 3 is flammable and combustible liquids. Here's a real nice label. It's got everything on it. It's probably a 55-gallon drum here, and it's got the DOT 4-inch square turned on a diamond. I see the HMAS at the bottom right. There's the 4-digit ID number top right. All chemicals have a 4-digit ID number. There's the name of the chemical. And on the left, running vertically, you can see the pictures from the GHS. We'll go in more detail on that on another video. All right, again, here's the DOT. There's 9 hazard classes, a few other labels or placards there. Now, there's 2 ways that a chemical affects us. Now, remember, we're talking overexposure, acute or chronic. Acute, usually a high concentration that affects us immediately. If you take a strong acid or caustic and spill it on your arm, it's going to burn. It could even discolor your skin. That's an acute effect. Happens right now. Chronic, there's your low dose over a long period of time. Sure, we can watch TV any night and see advertisements from lawyers over asbestos, overexposure in the past, and then we've got silica dust also. Those are the main 2 we hear about, but there were so many other chemicals, especially in the older days when we didn't protect the worker. Again, why HAZCOM came into being is to protect us from overexposure. But this chronic is usually a low dose over a long period of time. It can take 20, 30 years before it affects you in a negative way to where you're diseased, sick, and even to the point of death. Let's look at something else. Here's the routes of entry. How do chemicals get into my body? Well, there's inhalation by breathing, easiest way for something to happen. And if we work around some chemicals and the vapor is potential and the smell is potential, we're going to do some air sampling of your work area to make sure you're working within the limits of what exposure you can take. OSHA has a list of parts per million, micrograms per cubic meter of chemicals that we can work safely. And if we're above that, we'd have to do some exhausting probably to take care of most of it. And there's some cases to the point where the employee might have to wear a respirator. But inhalation is number 1. Ingestion by swallowing. And I know that we're not going around tasting the chemicals, but this goes all the way back to when you as a child wash your hands. We can get chemical on our hands and touch our face, our mouth, and that's how ingestion usually happens. Injection is by having cuts on your skin, coming to work, working in your garden or something, and then you get exposed to some chemical, or just cut yourself on something that's contaminated. Skin absorption and skin and eye contact I like to separate. Skin absorption, this is probably chronic over a period of time. Chemicals on your hands or such can soak through, permeate through the fatty tissue of the pores of your skin and get into your bloodstream. Skin absorption. And then there's skin and eye contact. You splash something on you that affects you immediately, skin and eye contact, as opposed to absorption. So there's the 5 routes of entry, just how chemicals get into our body. Now, if it comes to a spill or a leak is discovered, we must report that immediately. Get your supervisor involved immediately. Drums are handled by forklifts, always handled by forklifts, sometimes a drum dolly by hand, but usually forklifts. So of course, the main reason something's going to leak like that is probably forklift damage, accidental damage. And if we do have that, report it immediately. You may smell something. Your eyes may become irritated in the area. There may be vapors or mist in the area. You might hear a pressurized line. Puddles near drums. That's a dead giveaway if you're not outside in the rain. So report these immediately. Anytime you encounter a spill, don't just point at it and think somebody should do something about that. Yeah, you do something about it. Let's take a look at secondary containers. Again, we've mentioned them, and you can see some on individual small containers. You can see the NFPA diamond, blue, red, yellow. Most people are moving toward the GHS you see on the left now, and you can buy these in rolls of peel-off stickers to put on your containers. But we must have a labeling system in our HAZCOM program and make sure the employees know it so we can have all these containers marked. Now, when it comes to secondary containers, never use a beverage or food container. A Gatorade bottle, I mean, is that blue Gatorade or Windex? The original Gatorade, the lime green, is that Gatorade or antifreeze? So never use a coffee cup. You know, people buy coffee cups, sometimes just a cheap coffee cup, and if you put a chemical in a coffee cup, they may be distracted and it looks like the one they use at home, and they may just take a drink of it. So never use a container that somebody might eat or drink out of. Okay, that's the first part, the basics of HAZCOM, and we do have a couple more videos that we're making. This is part one, the basics, and then we're also going to do GHS and SDSs, have a special video just for each one of those to go in detail. And again, this is Terry with McHenry Creek Fishers, and there's my contact information. Shoot me an email and we'll talk. And thanks for watching, and have a great, fun day. Thanks.